Gary Leon Brown was born August 10, 1952, in Buffalo, New York, into a world that, for many, held the promise of a bright future. On the surface, his beginnings were ordinary like countless children in post-war America. He was part of a family, a community, and a society grappling with change. Little in his childhood records would immediately signal the dark path his life would eventually take. Friends and acquaintances from this period would later struggle to reconcile the boy they knew with the man he became. A common refrain in stories that end in tragedy and crime. The seeds of his future actions were perhaps sown in these formative years, hidden from plain view. As a young boy, Brown faced challenges that shaped his worldview and his character. While details of his upbringing are not extensively documented, it is understood that his family life was not without its difficulties. Like many families, they likely experienced financial pressures and the day-to-day struggles of raising children. These early experiences can have a profound impact on a young person's development, influencing their choices and their ability to cope with adversity. For some, such challenges build resilience and strength. For others, they can create fissures in their moral foundation, leaving them vulnerable to making poor decisions later in life when faced with temptation or desperation. Growing into adolescence, Brown's path did not straighten into one of conventional success. He struggled in school, finding it difficult to apply himself to his studies. This lack of academic achievement closed certain doors and limited his future prospects. The transition from a troubled young man to a perpetrator of serious crimes occurred in the late 1970s. Gary Leon Brown's disregard for the law escalated dramatically. He began to target homes, seeking to take what was not his. His method was simple yet terrifying. He would break into houses, often when the residents were present, turning property crime into a frightening violation. These were not simple burglaries in the dead of night. They were invasions of the safest space a person has. The motive was financial gain, a desperate and illicit attempt to acquire what he felt he could not obtain honestly. The crimes showed a disturbing pattern of escalation. What might have started as theft soon spiraled into something far more sinister. He didn't just take property, he confronted occupants. These confrontations were fraught with tension and fear. He used the threat of harm to control victims. Cash, jewelry, other valuables. His actions showed a cold detachment from the terror he inflicted. For victims, loss of possessions was secondary to emotional trauma. The series continued, creating a climate of fear in targeted communities. Each incident reminded residents a dangerous individual was at large. Brown's activities culminated in a tragic, irreversible act. A life was lost. With a homicide now part of the case, the investigation intensified significantly. Detectives from multiple jurisdictions pooling their resources, meticulously comparing notes at crime scenes. They recognized the unique signature, the modus operandi, linking the string of home invasions to the final fatal incident. A critical piece of evidence emerged. Investigators discovered a single clear fingerprint on an object. Close-up of the print. In forensics, a fingerprint is as good as a signature. This print became the cornerstone of their case. They ran the fingerprint through databases. The systems were slower then, but still powerful. The search produced a match: Gary Leon Brown. His name and prior mugshot were already in the system. The faceless predator finally had a name and a face. Detectives now had a primary suspect. They began building a comprehensive case, gathering every piece of information about his whereabouts, his associates, and his activities around the time of the crimes. Armed with an arrest warrant and fingerprint evidence, law enforcement began the search. They tracked his known associates and visited his last known addresses. Brown was found and taken into custody without incident. The trial of Gary Leon Brown began under the solemn watch of the public and the media. The prosecution laid out its case with methodical precision, determined to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecuting attorneys presented a clear timeline of the crimes. Surviving victims testified. They recounted their terrifying ordeals, voices trembling as they described the invasions in fear. Their testimony painted a chilling picture for the jury. The centerpiece was the forensic evidence. A crime lab expert explained fingerprint analysis. The expert said the print at the homicide scene was a perfect match to Gary Leon Brown to no one else. The testimony was powerful and hard to refute. The prosecutor displayed large fingerprint charts. Close-ups showed unique ridges and whorls, matched point by point. The defense faced an uphill battle, nearly impossible to argue against the fingerprint. After closing arguments, the case went to the jury. Their deliberations were short. The evidence was overwhelming. Guilty on all counts, including murder. Gary Leon Brown was sentenced to death. He was transferred to death row, a place of stark reality and finality. For years, the legal battle continued, but each appeal was ultimately denied. On August 24, 1986, the sentence was carried out. A single fingerprint was the key to bringing him to justice.